In the early 90s, the Seattle grunge rock movement had become extremely popular, especially when you had bands such as Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and even Soundgarden who had come to define this genre. Alice in Chains, however, always catered to like a more darker aspect in their music, especially when it comes to discussing their sophomore album, Dirt. Alice in Chains were that one band who could superbly master both metal and alternative. After the release of their debut album, Facelift, the band were ready to take their sound to the masses. After falling prey to heroin addiction early in his career, Lane Staley decided to pour all of his emotion regarding his issues into his songs, almost using them as a way to help him clean up his act. Furthermore, across every song, Jerry Cantrell really came to his own as a melody writer, with tracks like Down in a Hole and Rooster being some of the most beautiful pieces to come from the grunge scene. While Facelift set the stage for what the grunge sound would become in the early 90s, Dirt was the album where Alice in Chains started to inject real pain into the records, documenting the different vices each member was having, especially with Lane Staley in particular sinking deeper and deeper into his heroin addiction, which sadly led to his demise in 2002. There's a lot of beauty to be found on Dirt, but what you'll be hearing is a band like Alice in Chains at their creative peak, licking their wounds from all the damages they put onto themselves. Demon Days is the perfect example of Gorillaz' incredible storytelling ability. The album is sprawling and varied as it broadly draws from synth pop, hip hop, and alternative rock to create such a unique selection of tracks which all work equally as standalone snippets or part of a whole narrative. This album is packed with so many phenomenal records to choose from the club energy of Dare, to the bone-chilling track November Has Come featuring a guest verse from the late MF Doom, to Fire Is Coming Out of the Monkey's Head featuring a narration from the late Dennis Hopper out of all people, to showing us the corruption of the innocents with the track Kids with Guns, and the highest point of the album is perhaps the band's most popular song, Feel Good Inc. Demon Days is such an extraordinary record that is so rewarding to listen to as it is fun, danceable, and catchy. The downward spiral endures as Nine Inch Nails' crowning achievement. As the gold standard of 90s industrial, it has been critically praised and poorly imitated almost non-stop since its release back in 1994. It's such a brilliant concept record that will slap you across the face with industrial breakbeats and unapologetically versatile lyrics from the band's lead vocalist Trent Reznor. Trent Reznor massively showcased how much of a musical genius he is, as he not only approaches for like a more darker sound that was very distinct from the group's debut record Pretty Hate Machine, but also brilliantly sprinkling his sporadic ambient work throughout this entire record. With having an abundance of amazing songs from Mr. Self-Destruct, Piggy, Eraser, Closer, and even the closing track Hurt, the Downward Spiral is undoubtedly such a perfect, intensely dark album that's earned its title of an all-time classic. There's simply no synth pop group like Depeche Mode. When it comes to discussing artists who have been credited for revolutionizing electronic music, Depeche Mode are one of the few that comes to mind. And for good reason, because their sound is just so timeless. With their 7th studio album Violator, Depeche Mode pushed their sound into the new decade as it contains everything of what people love about the group. While the band's catalog is undeniably phenomenal, Violator was the album that showcased Depeche Mode at their most ambitious, as the production is so haunting yet so beautiful at the same time. Lyrically, the album's themes of lust, love, sex, and religion is the perfect representation of the group and their image. It features some of the band's biggest songs from Policy of Truth, Personal Jesus, and most notably their signature tune, Enjoy the Silence. Overall, Violator is such a masterclass record that was a turning point for Depeche Mode as it propelled the band into international superstardom, as it excellently combined genres of synth pop, alternative rock, and dark wave. In other words, it's a fantastic record that will definitely be worth your time as it contains all hits and no misses. Now, this was a very, very, very tricky one. The moment I thought about putting a Daft Punk album on the list, I had the difficult choice between choosing Random Access Memories or Discovery. I went back and forth with this one. I really did. A part of me really wanted to choose Random Access Memories, as it's definitely the one album in their catalog that I replayed the most, marking the perfect swan song for the French duo, but I unfortunately decided to give the slight edge to Discovery. While Daft Punk had already established themselves with their first album Homework, Discovery's futuristic hit singles blasted the French duo into the stratosphere. Even though dance clubs had already been playing electronica in various forms throughout the 90s, but with this album, it became a very popular trend in both electronica and dance music in general. Even though Discovery does retain some elements of what made Homework great, the disco influence is on full display on this record, as it served to create something impossibly fresh with a unique combination of funk, disco, and synth pop. On top of that, this album is just packed with bangers from start to finish. From my personal favorite track, Digital Love, which is the perfect love song, to Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, which is an irresistible funky pop tune. Meanwhile, you have other tracks like Something About Us, Face to Face, and the popular song One More Time are all killer tracks. Like seriously, this album has such a flawless flow to it that not many albums can replicate. Throughout the 60s and early 70s, Tina Turner was a huge household name in the music industry along with her husband Ike Turner. However, once her career slowly started to fizzle out in the late 70s and early 80s, she eventually became a nostalgia act. After Tina finally separated from her husband Ike after years of dealing with domestic abuse, she attempted to forge her own career but struggled for quite some time as a solo artist, especially with albums like Rough and Love Explosion had massively flopped. But as time went on, things eventually started looking up for Tina Turner once she signed with Capitol Records in 1983. And after the surprising success of her cover of Al Green's 1971 hit single Let's Stay Together was released, Capitol Records gave her the green light to start working on her fifth studio album, Private Dancer. After spending 2 weeks to record the album, Private Dancer was finally released in May of 1984, and it became a huge success both critically and commercially, marking a huge career resurgence for Tina Turner as it propelled her back into the realm of superstardom and solidifying her as a sonic force. Tina found her sound that perfectly fitted her voice on this record, showcasing its raspy brilliance with tracks that are a perfect mixture of ballads, pop, rock, and R&B. A remarkable album to a remarkable story, Tina Turner's Private Dancer is easily the greatest comeback album of all time, proving beyond the shadow of a doubt that Tina Turner was simply the best. Throughout the 80s and early 90s, Metallica was at their prime, especially when it came to releasing 5 incredible albums in a row. While Ride the Lightning and the Black Album were really close contenders, I ultimately decided to go with their third studio album, Master of Puppets, as it's universally considered to be the definitive Metallica record. Master of Puppets is the album where Metallica had fully reached their apex, being the final album to feature the band's bassist, Cliff Burton, who had tragically passed away after this album's release. There is not 1 ounce of fat in one of these records, which is saying something considering the fact that most of them eclipse the 5-minute mark. Trying to find a terrible record on this album is a challenge because even the quote-unquote lesser songs are still pretty damn great. While the early days of metal were just all about feeling badass, songs like Master of Puppets and Disposable Heroes were more like journeys when you fully listen to them. Before the release of Master of Puppets, people already knew that Metallica was a phenomenal metal band, but once critics heard this album, they became the greatest of their peers and a metal force to be reckoned with. It was the culmination of the band's growing cult popularity and paved the way for them to become mainstream icons.
I grew up on the crime side, the New York Times side. Staying alive was no job, had second hands.
With this record containing such a gritty style to it, it helped usher in the hardcore rap era. But it wasn't all shock, as Ghostface Killah, Method Man, Old Dirty Bastard, Raekwon, RZA, GZA, and Inspector Deck all proved to be as humorous as they were dark. From iconic tracks like Protect Your Neck and Cream, Wu-Tang Clan's 36 Chambers was poised to achieve status as an all-timer. Perhaps the strongest aspect of the album is what it proves. Even though all members of the clan were all phenomenally gifted artists in their own right, 36 Chambers proved that when they were all united, they're an unstoppable force. It's harsh and blunt in places, but it's also playful and witty. The beats are booming, but it's also never over the top. Overall, Enter the Wu-Tang is the perfect rap album, and it'll forever be a classic of the genre. Now, when I thought about putting a Pink Floyd album on this list, I really should have gone with Dark Side of the Moon. I really should have. There really should be no reason why I didn't put it on my list. However, with that being said, I'm probably one of the few people who believe that Wish You Were Here is Pink Floyd's best work. While trying not to hide behind Dark Side of the Moon's aura, Wish You Were Here presented a new look for Pink Floyd, informed by their time in the spotlight. Spanning just 5 songs, this should be mandatory listening for anyone who's thinking about breaking into the music industry, with songs like Have a Cigar and Welcome to the Machine showing the manufactured aspects of the business. While those 2 songs are undeniably great, Shine on You Crazy Diamond is where the album really shines, as the song is a tribute to the co-founding member and the former frontman of Pink Floyd, Syd Barrett, who had departed the band due to the increase in problems with his mental health. While Dark Side of the Moon may be one of the few albums that makes you feel untouchable in the public eye, Wish You Were Here was the album that gave us a glimpse of Pink Floyd's real humanity.